Welcome to the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Lowry, founder of Twin Cities Neural Retraining and a certified MAP method practitioner, specializing in allergies and sensitivities, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, sleep issues, infertility, autoimmunity, and other chronic health conditions. Join me for episode 47, where we speak with my client, Dawn Brozek, who is interested in the MAP method to address Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, MCAS, histamine intolerance, neck and shoulder pain, skin issues, fatigue, mild asthma, and tinnitus. Hear about the benefits she experienced from a set of 6 sessions, including the significant reduction of her physical symptoms. As always, we must disclaim that the information we share in the podcast is for educational purposes only. As MAP method practitioners, we do not diagnose or treat disease, and we recommend working with a qualified practitioner. Now, let's hear from Dawn. Welcome, Dawn. I'm so excited to have you join me on my podcast. So, Dawn, we've known each other just since May, so just a few months, but I'm really excited that you agreed to come and talk with me about your experiences with a set of MAP sessions and, what you learned about the method through that. So welcome, Dawn.
Thanks for inviting me. I feel really grateful to be invited to share my experience. It's been, really interesting and really helpful, and I'm, excited to share my experience. I think this is a really up and coming treatment method, and I'd like to have others, become more aware and kind of put this on the radar, because I think it's not widely known yet. So looking forward to having it, be part of the larger conversation.
Yeah. And so, getting to that point, how did you hear about the MAP method, this advanced method of neural retraining? How did you how did you hear about it?
So the short answer for that is that a kind stranger on the internet recommended it. But the longer answer is that this kind stranger was in a health forum, and I am part of many, many health forums for chronic health conditions, for different symptoms that I experience, and also for a lot of different treatments and remedies that I've either tried, am trying, or was interested in learning more about. So I'm part of many overlapping forums, and I had asked a question in a forum, and a very nice woman came back with a recommendation of a handful of things that I could consider trying. And I had tried most of them already, including meditation, which I am a big fan of. And that's, part of something that I still practice and have been practicing for years. But she did mention the MAP method, which was not on my radar at all. And I was really intrigued. So part of me was skeptical, because in a lot of these chronic health forums, there are so many suggestions, things that have worked for people, but it's kind of the Wild West. It's a lot of the methods don't have good evidence necessarily, or evidence that I feel comfortable with. Some of them work for some people, don't work for others. I've tried many things. So I was interested in learning more, because I had not heard about it at all. So I wanted to go explore more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you heard about it, presumably you maybe found your way to a website that had some more information, and then somehow found me. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that happened? What were the next steps? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I wanted to go, I'm somebody who likes to step in with eyes wide open. And so I wanted to understand what this was about, what the evidence was MAP potentially a good fit for me and my goals and what I was looking for. So, I began kind of weaving together different strands. So looking, this kind person on the internet recommended you specifically. So I looked at your website and, was favorably impressed. But that also led me to the MAP Coaching Institute, where I was looking at a lot of different practitioners. And then I went to the YouTube site and watched many videos about people's experiences. And so some of what impressed me and made me decide that this was something that I wanted to pursue, I would say right off the bat, the fact that it's a method that that fundamentally understands we live in a body mind, that this isn't, we don't have a disconnected head from our body, that this is all one system. And that is really powerful to me. And that is absolutely the way that I understand my own health situation. And so the fact that that is core and central to the method was pretty persuasive to me. Second, the fact, a few things caught my attention. The fact that it has been described as kind of next generation EMDR or neural retraining. These are both things that I've done and found some benefit with, but the prospect that this was more advanced using newer techniques, the fact that it was faster and less work, frankly, was appealing to me. Another factor was that there were testimonials from people who have mast cell activation, which I do too, which is a really difficult immune system problem to treat. And so the fact that there were testimonials from folks who had similar issues to me that had found benefit was really persuasive. But not only that, the fact that this method seemed to help such a broad range of conditions was really fascinating and really compelling to me. And then I would say another thing was that I appreciated the way that you really set expectations in your podcast and in the information that you shared. So the MAP method doesn't claim to be a panacea for all, it's not like you can go from very ill and have chronic health conditions to 100% you have no problems in your life and you're totally magically well. So it was, the expectations were set as far as what to expect in the session, what to expect, in the first maybe handful of weeks and longer term. And so, but that most people experience significant tangible improvements. So that was also appealing to me. And I would say the last thing there was that I appreciated that you had mentioned several times in your podcast that you had not seen a client for more than 10 sessions, probably, that most people's goals were resolved within that time frame. And that was very attractive to me because something I struggle with in traditional talk therapy is that it's kind of open-ended and it can literally go on every single week for years and years. And it can be really intense. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it just feels like a lot. And so something that intrigued me about the MAP method was that potentially with only a handful of sessions, I would be able to determine whether this was something that was going to be effective for me or not.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So that's a lot. I do think that the MAP method is part of this kind of emerging interest in mind body medicine. And it does recognize, and so this is a concept that a lot of people have trouble with, right? So you had embraced it already, that we are mind, body, spirit, right? We are all of these things are completely integrated. There is no mind and here and body there. We are all. It's a holistic practice, really. It's a wellness practice, and so the reason, and some people also, so people have trouble with the concept of like what you can work with the mind and see effects on the physical
body like symptoms? And it's like, well, yes, because this is all integrated. Every thought, every emotion that we have, every trauma, every part of our life experience adds up to our experience of health, mental health, emotional health, physical health. And doesn't that make much more sense than believing that for some reason at some age, like systems, just stopped working, right? Like, oh, your thyroid's not working properly, or your immune system now it's attacking itself. Like, why would that be? And so the traditional ways of looking at illness, it's so often idiopathic, right? We just don't know why. But I think with this method, people not only do they have the opportunity to see some of their physical symptoms start to resolve, but they also are able to make the connections of sort of like, why did this happen to me, right? Why did these patterns show up for me? What are they related to? What experiences in my life kind of set me up for this? And that, I think, is really, I think for some people, for the right person, that is interesting. That's attractive, because it's not just it's not just trying to resolve symptoms, but it is actually helping us to understand ourselves, right, as a whole being, in a different way. Now we can make the connections, like, why did this happen to me? Why has my life journey been like this? And start to have some insights that can be really powerful, I think. So when you came to the method, you decided that, I think I'll try this. What were you hoping to address?
In the immediate term, I was hoping to see a reduction in the physical symptoms that I was having. So, I'm on the continuum with histamine intolerance and mast cell activation, which is maybe in a nutshell, kind of a hyperactive immune system. And it brings a lot of different symptoms in a lot of different systems. And it's a complex illness, and not everybody presents the same way. So my experience and what goes on in my body is not the same as someone else. But, for a good many years, I've had chronic symptoms, around probably 20 or more symptoms. Some of them every single day without reprieve. Some of them kind of come and go. But I would say the ones that were most problematic for me and really impacted my quality of life are that I have hives, skin hives, every single day for at least 4 years. And that's no fun. It's kind of like, if you can imagine having, really bothersome mosquito bites, and just, the discomfort is quite considerable. So it's something that I manage. Also, a more recent symptom that popped up for me is the tinnitus, the ringing in my ear, which again, it's unrelenting. The noise is always in my head, and it is rather bothersome. I also have in different parts of my body just chronic muscle pain and muscle tension, unrelenting, and particularly in my shoulders and my neck. It impedes my movement. It's really an issue every day. And so I was hoping to potentially get some relief with those. But I did, again, the MAP method was really attractive to me because I really understand my own condition and my own experience as being built on my life experience. It's not just, as you said, idiopathic. These things just didn't pop out of nowhere. And I kept having more and more symptoms, and I'd go to various specialists in traditional medicine. And the feedback I was receiving was that I just needed to take medications that would suppress these symptoms. So there was no effort on the part of the doctors I was seeing, who, were lovely people, but were not connecting the dots between these various symptoms in my system, and also not really looking for any kind of root cause and absolutely not open to exploring the ways that the psyche was involved in that. And so for me, I have a pretty clear understanding that there's a lot of trauma in my history. And I'm very familiar with the well-known ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, which for the listeners who aren't familiar with that, it's very well documented. It came out in the 90s, and it was eventually run through the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, with more than 10,000 participants. I think it was like 15 or so thousand participants, which showed a very significant relationship between the types of childhood trauma, the amount of childhood trauma, and adult illness, controlling for a lot of factors. And so the more trauma that someone experienced in childhood and the more types of trauma, from neglect, abuse, issues in the family household, if someone had passed away, if someone was incarcerated, things like that, if there was mental illness in the home or alcoholism, all of these types of trauma, the more types and the more intense, the more likely people were to have diabetes, respiratory problems, alcoholism, early death, all manner of illnesses, and particularly for women, immune and autoimmune conditions, highly correlated. So it's really, to me, beyond question that these are related. And so I understand from my own experience that these were related. And so a lot of my frustration was when I would share this with my various doctors and say, well, there's a lot of trauma in my past. I think this is related. And I would get a range of answers from, I'm sorry that happened to you, to maybe you should see a therapist, but both true. And they were really missing the connection that my experiences had something to do with the physical presentation of my conditions. And so I am definitely a believer that what goes on in the mind is highly related to what's going on in the body. And I think there's evidence for that every day, but in this culture, we aren't really encouraged to think about our subconscious. We don't have a lot of conversations about the way our subconscious is involved in kind of the mind-body loop and the feedback that goes on there. But for me, I'm a very prolific dreamer. And so I see my subconscious showing up every single day and showing me things in my dreams. So I know, my subconscious is active. It's working through symbols and images in my dreams every day. But there's different evidence as well that's really striking. So I was really intrigued by a study that came out that showed, it was a study of infants who were born in China but were adopted in French Canada. And so the researchers were studying the development of language. And so they found that infants who had been exposed to Chinese language when they were young, but were adopted by families in French Canada and were French speaking only, when they did brain scans of those infants and they were exposed to Chinese tones, not even language, just tones that are in the Chinese language, the brains of these adults lit up in similar ways to people who were bilingual and people who were Chinese speakers. So the mind remembers, even though these people were not fluent, could not speak, did not understand Chinese, their brains knew. And so we take all of the information into our bodies. It's stored in our bodies, whether we are consciously aware of that or not. And, another aspect of that for me is that, looking at the mind-body connection, if we, I think everyone has the ability potentially to think about, maybe a favorite birthday with who was there, singing, kind of the emotions that were there, and thinking about the favorite cake and what did it smell like and what did it taste like, and taking that first bite. And our body, if we're doing this exercise, we will salivate when we're thinking about that. So a physiological event happens in our body as a result of the thoughts we're thinking in our mind. So to me, it's abundantly evident that we live in a body mind, and this is how the whole system operates.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's I think it's really important for people to understand that this subconscious mind runs all the systems of the body, and it always has. Right. So we don't as you said, we don't often think about that. When you when you go to see your doctor, that's not a topic of conversation. But your subconscious mind, which is 90 to 95% of all brain activity, has this really complicated job of managing, monitoring, and optimizing all systems of the body. And when we are in good health, it's thanks to that subconscious mind doing its job, in a seamless way so that you never have to think about these things, right? But then when health starts to decline, we never think about the role of the subconscious mind. What's going on in the subconscious mind? Why can't it manage these processes the way it used to? And how do we get it? How do we get it functioning optimally again? And often, what is causing the blocks or barriers, in the subconscious mind has to do with traumatic life experiences. And by trauma, all we mean is painful emotional experiences, right? It doesn't have to be, being kidnapped or some big, capital T trauma. It can be small things. It doesn't, the actual event doesn't matter as much as what your mind did with the event, right? What you made it mean, or how it affected you, the impact that the event had on you. So it could be very small. It could be a small sort of separation kind of incident from your parents, or it could be like a bullying incident, or maybe you were teased, or there was some, for people in certain ethnic groups, there's sometimes, discrimination events, that maybe none of them are very big, right? But they add up. They add up, right? And the thing about these painful emotional events is that they change the way your nervous system works. They change the way the danger sensing part of your brain works. They fundamentally change the function of these systems. And because our brain is the director of all other functions, physiological functions, therefore, other functions of the body start to become dysregulated, like the immune system. So, this is so I'm glad you mentioned the ACEs study. I think it is a really important study. It is not new. It's from the 1990s, right? It's from the mid 1990s. The CDC did this study with Kaiser Permanente. And like you said, there are 17,000 subjects. They answered 10 questions. They answered 10 questions that, were you ever separated from your parent? Or was there, abuse? Were you a witness to abuse? Or, simple questions that don't even cover the full spectrum of traumatic events, right? And you get 1 point for each of those questions. So 10 questions, 10 possible traumatic kinds of things you could have experienced in your life before the age of 18. And if you said yes to 4 or more of those questions, it's like the same point value for no matter what the question was. So if you get a score of 4 or higher, that was correlated really, really tightly with your increased lifetime risk of these chronic health issues, including addictions, including all the chronic illnesses that we know, and as you said, early death. So, everyone should be talking about this, right? Everyone in healthcare should be talking about this because this is really important to understand. But I think partially, it was interesting. It was noted, but I don't think that we really had the methods to, aside from psychotherapy, talk therapy, to address trauma. And so really no one knew what to do. Even if you could recognize, even if on your intake form, and very few practitioners have this question on their intake form, right? Do you feel you have a significant history of trauma? Do you have an ACEs score of 4 or more? Most practitioners are not querying for this, but even if they did, I think they felt like what do I do about that? What step do I take? I don't have tools in my toolbox to really act on that. So though it was noted, it really wasn't, it didn't change the practice of medicine. I do think maybe the alternative medicine world has embraced that more, and there's more and more focus on trauma-informed care, which is good. But again, I do think that still the tools for dealing with trauma and reversing the effects of trauma have been somewhat limited. But with the MAP method, we do have a way to interface, with that subconscious mind, right? To get right to that level and to start to work with some of these traumas that have had an effect, unrecognized, but have had an effect on us emotionally, mentally, physically. So you had talked about how you heard that the MAP method, was kind of attractive to you, that the MAP method seemed to be fast and gentle and fairly, didn't require a lot from the clients, and it wasn't like work. So maybe you can just talk about, that was your impression before you came to MAP sessions, but now that you've had about 6 sessions, maybe you can just talk about, if that held up for you, does that feel true to you? And yeah, what impressed you, if anything, about MAP method?
It definitely did hold true to my expectations, and having been in talk therapy and also having tried EMDR, eye movement, EMD, desensitization, and reprogramming as a way of trying to work with traumatic memories. Those methods, I think, they're really intense, and I found benefit in both traditional talk therapy and in EMDR, but they're really emotionally intense. And as much as good therapists and good EMDR practitioners try to put safeguards around that, it really requires kind of a deep dive into some pretty heavy, painful, emotional stuff. I don't know if there's any way around that. And so that's hard, it's just hard. And so I really appreciated that the MAP method was not like that. So when I came to a session, we would talk about a few things, possibilities for what we could explore more deeply in the session. And I didn't need to dredge up all of the details, all of the painful emotions to communicate something. I could just kind of describe it pretty basically in a few sentences, and you understood the scenario, and we could go from there, and we could just identify maybe a couple of the emotions just with a word or two, again, without me having to really just marinate in painful stuff. And so it really was gentle, and I appreciated that. It's a method where during the session, it is not required of me to be giving my full attention and concentrating very hard, and that feels like emotional work to me. And sometimes that's productive, but I appreciated that I could just relax and float along. And if my attention wandered, that was okay. This was still going to be an effective method. It was really relaxing, and I felt like I was just on a raft on a lazy river, and there were some twists and turns in the lazy river, a couple little rapids. I was just along for the ride, and it just didn't feel like work to me. And at the same time, though, a lot of the insights that emerged from these sessions were really powerful to me, really beneficial in helping me understand that whatever scenario I came and presented with was really not the issue. The issue was something much more core emotional that happened much earlier in my life. And sometimes those connections were, I was just gobsmacked. I didn't see it at all. After we had kind of made these connections, it was abundantly clear. But at the time, I would just kind of take at face value, whatever the scenario was, whatever I was reacting to, that was the issue. I would also say, in terms of the gentleness of the method, I remember several occasions, at least two, where I arrived at the session pretty wound up, just, intense things going on in my life, stressful day, and now it's time for my session. So I would arrive with a lot of high energy, and every single time without fail, I would leave the session so grounded in my body, having, my breathing being much slower, much more relaxed, and being really mentally focused. So I left with a different body than I arrived with. And it was, so whatever was going on, and even though some of these things, they're not that, we're not talking about, going to a concert or having fun. We're talking sometimes about, things that are difficult, but, it was not emotionally draining. It was actually really cleansing. Every session felt very cleansing to me. So I would call it gentle, even though it is, we're doing good work. But it doesn't feel taxing and draining. It feels really cleansing and uplifting to me.
Yeah. So gentle. So this is the part that people can't get their minds around sometimes, that something can be gentle but very effective as well. And maybe do you have, so you had started by comparing it to talk therapy and EMDR. I'd be curious to hear, since you had tried those other methods, do you feel like the MAP method was somehow more effective, or like more complete in its treatment of whatever traumas you were working with?
Yes, because I feel like it was just so efficient. And so compared to talk therapy or EMDR, where it really did require a lot of explaining, unearthing, diving deep, and sitting with all of that. And EMDR as well, like, I understand the method, but the details really matter. And imagining being in some of these painful experiences is part of the method, and rewriting some of the endings and some of the responses is part of the method. And I did derive some benefit from that, but comparatively, the MAP method was so much more efficient. Like, I was just amazed at how quickly some of these connections were made without having to just pull it all out. It once those associations were made for me about, this issue that I'm dealing with is really not about what it is on the surface. It's about something much deeper than that I'm reacting to and responding to. But it was very quick. And the instructions that you would give to my subconscious felt like they were landing very quickly. And so throughout the session, kind of back to the lazy river analogy, I would feel, different emotions coming and going. And so at times, something, really tender, vulnerable would come up. I would feel maybe slightly weepy, but just, a very short time later, with different instructions, I felt kind of joyful, like that moment had passed, and it didn't linger. It wasn't troublesome and heavy. It just kind of was. There it was, and there it went. And so I felt like the work that we could do in one MAP session was just equivalent to so many long and intense talk therapy sessions. So for that reason, I much prefer what's going on in MAP.
Yeah.
And like I said, I never left feeling depleted, and sometimes for my personal experience, leaving therapy, I felt exhausted after. And some of the work was really good, but it is, for me, tiring. And the MAP method, I would leave ready. I could immediately go and start going back to work and doing what I needed to do. I didn't feel depleted. I didn't need to recover from a MAP session. I actually felt recovered leaving from a MAP session.
Yeah. So, I think the MAP method, so like we were saying, it's gentle and effective, and that's like a combination that's not, it's not often expected, that something that can be very gentle could also be so powerfully effective. And, I like to say that, the method was described to me as a quantum leap over EMDR and EFT tapping. And while I had never experienced EMDR myself, I was trained in tapping. So I have, I have some comparison there. But I do feel like with the MAP method, we get to like a deeper level. So we're able to address issues at their roots. And also the issue that, the example, let's say, of the painful emotional experience that you might be focusing on as I offer your subconscious mind some instructions. We're not just having your subconscious mind neutralize the painful emotions around that memory, but all the associated memories. And so I feel like because it's like a batch process, right? And it happens in minutes. I mean, sometimes I feel bad, because the person that I'm working with has had a lot of trauma, and when they come to the session, there are very difficult things that they want to resolve, right? And they realize that they can do it in a MAP session, and it can be a teary experience at first when they put their mind on that memory. And but I also know it's like, well, this is going to be, in 2 minutes or so, it's going to start to lift, sometimes less. And so I feel like, well, this is going to be really worth it for them, right? It's going to be worth it for them to spend that short period of time focusing on this painful experience from their past, because now they're really going to be free of it, and and so they won't have to experience that pain again, right? It just resolves, and it's almost magical, right? Yeah. So, yeah. And so maybe in terms of an explanation of what the MAP method is, I just want to say it is an advanced method of neural retraining. It does require initiation to the method. So people watch a 15-minute video, they come to their first session, we finish the initiation, and then we start working on their first topic, which is usually an emotional topic. And during that 1-hour session, we want you, the client and the practitioner, we want to see that the painful emotions around this memory or this topic, whatever we've identified as the subject, is dissipated, so that by the end of that 1 hour, that you have a different emotional response to thinking about the same topic. And that, that is very, I think it's a good trial of the MAP method to see if it's going to be effective for you. Yeah. So maybe you can just talk about that. Your first. If you remember anything about your first session? Some people feel a little like nervous about what is she talking about, this initiation? Like what is that? And how can it be that we sit on a Zoom video conference and I give verbal instructions to your subconscious mind and stuff changes, right? Like, how can that happen? Like, where's the equipment? Right? Yeah. So maybe you can just give your perspective on that, because I think that would be helpful for people who are just hearing about this method for the first time.
I do too. And I used to be one of those people who couldn't quite get my head around, the language of initiation. I wasn't sure what that meant. Right, the equipment, the verbal instructions, how does this all work? And, part of what was helpful for me is I just kind of let go of that. I don't need, it's kind of like, I know how to drive a car. I don't know how every single part of the car operates. So I don't need to understand exactly how this method works. I don't need to, sometimes I'm very curious during the session, like, what are you saying? And I'm trying to follow what you're saying, but it's I don't know, it's not something that I can easily memorize, and that's not my job in the session. So, sometimes I'm curious and I'm trying to pay attention, but then I go back to, I'm just supposed to be watching what's unfolding for me, noticing what's going on. And So the initiation that, I watched a video, you said some things to my subconscious, and that was that. And I was ready to go. So again, it wasn't hard. I didn't have to do anything. It was just more priming my subconscious to be able to receive and understand the things that you were going to say. And it's not, for me, it wasn't scary. Again, a little curious about, what does initiation mean? I don't understand necessarily how the subconscious exactly works and how it does exactly receive instructions, but I can say it was easy, it was painless, it was fast, and then we were good to go. And so I arrived at the first session, and again, with the measuring kind of the before and after. So I came with a scenario which I thought to be really low hanging fruit. I thought, okay, in the first session, let's really not go do a deep dive with, painful childhood trauma. So I came with something that I consider to be a pretty common phobia around public speaking. I know that the fear of public speaking is widespread, and I'm also someone who's really affected by it. But for me, I had a couple of instances where it was my bodily response to it was so intense, so just orders of magnitude beyond what would really, in my perception, be normally called for with nerves about speaking publicly. And so we went back to those memories, and very quickly it became clear to me that it really was not about public speaking. It was that so much my body remembered very specific times of being very visible about speaking up, about being alone and visible and speaking up, and how those were profoundly unsafe circumstances for me as a child. And so it was such an aha moment. My mind was literally blown. For so long, I thought I had a fear of public speaking, but really it was my body being very smart and trying to keep me safe and activating, because my body remembered that these were very unsafe circumstances. So, it was really helpful. And so by the end of the session, when you asked about, where was my discomfort level, my intensity around, fear of public speaking or recalling these memories, it was very low. It really was, again, to me, quite astonishing. I wasn't expecting that, because this is kind of a long held, deep seated fear for me, that even thinking about some of those instances, not pleasant. I don't like to go there mentally, but it really had dissipated, and it was quite magical.
Yeah. Yeah, the first session is 1 hour. And, we use like the first 15 minutes to sort of discuss like what the subject is going to be, how you feel about it, how strong are those emotions for you. And then I, finish initiating you to the method, which takes, a few minutes. So we really have like 45 minutes to work on something, But yes, often people come and they say, oh, I want to work on this. Like I've got a phobia, or I've got this, I have this memory from something traumatic from the past. But sometimes that takes us places, right? So we have the initial subject, but sometimes as we ask the subconscious mind to start working on those memories and neutralizing the painful emotions around them, other things start coming into your mind. So after each kind of round of instructions, I'm always asking you, like, okay, what happened for you there? Did anything come up for you? Did any memories pop into your mind, other memories? Or did you have any insights? Did you have any body sensations? Any particular words or thoughts like just come into your head? And so these are all evidence of your subconscious mind sort of showing you those connections. And not everybody has something to report. That's fine. But I always ask, because if there was an experience there, it is helpful for me to understand where your mind went, because then I can understand, oh, okay, well, we need to go here now. The next round of instructions should be about this. So, when there is feedback, it does help to direct the direction that we take the session. So, yeah. What else was memorable about your first few sessions, would you say?
I would say that, interestingly, after I think it was the session after the introductory session. I left the session and I had lots of hives on my back. It was interesting, but, it came and went quickly. It was, intense for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then it went away and, it didn't return. That's not my normal pattern of how my hives appear or when or the pattern. So, I really felt like, oh, something happened there. I feel really, I don't know, something was going on, and then it passed. But I would say, after a couple of sessions, I really, and again, this was helpful to hear that that's not uncommon, that after a session, shortly after, within, either immediately after, within a day or two, sometimes something can come up. And I think that's really evidence of something is shifting inside. And for me, that didn't linger. But after a couple of sessions, I really felt just a lot more settled. I felt less reactive to things going on in my world, and paralleling what I would experience in a MAP session, where sometimes emotions would come and they would just go, even kind of bigger emotions. That began to be reflected in my larger world, that when something upsetting happened, it just didn't stay and linger in the way that I assumed was normal. I thought it was normal for this stuff to hang around for a very long time. And I began to notice it just evaporated a lot more easily. Again, this is not a panacea where every single aspect of my life was perfectly joyful all the time, but it was a marked difference from how my normal had been. My new normal feels like emotionally it has a lot more ease. It just feels a little more grounded, and that's really helpful. And that has played out in after time with significant improvement in a lot of my physical symptoms. So I would just notice the thing like, where's that ringing in my ear? Wow, that used to be so bothersome. It was very loud in my ear, and I could try to ignore it and manage it the best I could. But gosh, I now have to get quiet and listen, and I can still hear it if I get really quiet, but I don't notice it. It's not just in my head all the time so prominently. The hives have really reduced, still there, but very just so not problematic in my life in the way that they had been. And, to my great joy, the pain in my neck and my shoulders is nearly gone. I can't even tell you, that's been so definable and noticeable for me, that I have such better range of motion. I don't have pain and tension in my shoulders anymore. So, kind of first came some noticing just calmer emotions and better responses to things going on in my world. And then later came shifts. And, I'm a prolific journaler, and I would write down things. And it was kind of, I would say, so we started kind of mid to late May. And by mid-July, I kept day after day, like, wow, I can't believe how good I feel. Like most of my very problematic symptoms, a bunch of them just went away. The less intense and problematic ones just gone, literally gone. I don't have those anymore, and they've stayed away. And that again is one thing I appreciate about the MAP method that appealed to me in contrast to a lot of the other things I've tried. So I've been on a many year odyssey to try to figure out my health things and figure out what's going to help me the most. And I have tried EFT, I've tried, all the things we've talked about. I've tried Wim Hof breathing and cold plunges and, you name it, acupuncture, aromatherapy, everything. And some I've decided to stay with, some I was not deriving great benefit from. And so what I did appreciate about the MAP method was that these changes feel durable. Whereas some of the other things I was doing, I really like acupuncture. It's something that I do, but it did not feel to me, in my experience, like it was creating lasting changes. So temporary, good, and maybe a couple days, I would see some benefits. And after that, it was back to the norm, back to baseline. So with the MAP method, these changes just continue to play out in a positive way. And recently I did have a hiccup, something happened, and it really kind of set me off. And some of my symptoms were really more intense again. But we worked on that, and now I'm back to feeling better. So And I think this is just life, there are ups and downs in life, and it's, ideally getting me to a place where I can ride those waves with more ease and with fewer physical symptoms in response to what's going on in my life and how I'm processing that and perceiving that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So when we first talked, we probably, we probably had the conversation where I said, typically the first couple, 2, 3 sessions, you may notice more emotional level changes or shifts, right? And after, maybe 3, 4, 5 sessions, we see like mental level shifts, right? Those habitual thoughts, and somewhere around sessions 4 to 6, is where we usually see changes on a physical level, right? That there's kind of this cumulative effect of the sessions that seems to have, we seem to see the shifts occur in that order: first the emotional, then the mental, and then the physical level. Would you say that was pretty much what you experienced yourself?
Yes, I would say that reflects my experience.
Yeah. And so, when you said that you had, this mast cell activations syndrome and a number of different symptoms that went along with that, I mean, and you were hoping that the MAT method would help you with MCAS. Do you feel like that was your experience? Did that help?
Definitely. Like I mentioned, I had, close to 2 dozen symptoms that, some would come and go, and some are really chronic and difficult to manage and just hard to live with on a daily basis. Takes a lot of emotional resources to cope with some of the symptoms. And so some some of the some of the issues just went away. Like, I've had chronic nerve pain in my right elbow for years. It's not extremely intense, it's not extremely bothersome in my life, but it's there and it hurts, and it's there most of the time. And that literally went away. That's just no longer there anymore. And it's what a delightful surprise. It's so nice to have an elbow that doesn't hurt. And like I mentioned, the chronic hives are really not real fun to have that every day, but greatly diminished to the point where I just don't find it super bothersome in my life. And when it does pop up, I have good tools with, breathing and meditation, and just it goes away. So, it's just something I work with. So greatly reduced versus really intense, very uncomfortable hives really frequently throughout the day. So much improved on that front too. I still have a few things that are there, and not sure what's going on, and they kind of wax and wane. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. But I would say on the issues that trouble me most, I notice tremendous progress in my body, and it is so welcome to live a little less burdened by some of these chronic problems.
Okay. Yeah. So you described some of the emotional shifts that you noticed, some of the physical shifts. Did you notice any mental shifts?
I would say those are less clear to me, but when I reflect on it now, I feel like the mental and emotional kind of go hand in hand for me. And so I feel, again, in a similar way to when I leave a MAP session, I feel really grounded and really clear. And I feel like that has, permeated my life to some degree, where I have more insight and more clarity on why I may be responding to things that I'm responding to. And sometimes I'm aware that, it's not healthy. I've overreacted. I'm super triggered, and there is something going on there. This is really not about this very small incident. It's something much deeper. And so it's really given me some very helpful tools to go deeper and explore my own experience. And, these patterns, I don't know about for anybody else, these patterns for me repeat themselves again and again and again and again. And I feel like, there are lessons here for me to learn. There are things that need to be, just patterns that I need to change. And so it's been helpful in that regard. I have a lot more clarity and insight about what's going on. And more space and just a little more of an exhale to be able to, collect myself and potentially respond differently in times when, I'm feeling something emotionally unpleasant.
Mm, yeah. And is there anything that you wished you had known before you came to your first MAP session, or is there something you wish you'd known about the MAP method that would have made it maybe a little easier for you to be like, yeah, I think I'll try this?
Yeah, I appreciate the people who've been on your podcast before, and I appreciate the folks who were on the YouTube videos who really help to demystify the process, because I think, again, it's hard to describe it. It's almost like, trying to describe music to someone who cannot hear it. It's like you have to experience it. But for folks who are curious, I would like to demystify it. It's not, no one's, hijacking my brain. It's sort of like just working with me, with what's already there, to move to a healthier place. Because with any, small t trauma, very emotionally impactful things that happen when we're young really do shape us and hold a lot of power. Our brains and bodies are very smart, and they're designed to try to keep us safe and functioning well. And everything is built upon the foundation of what happens in childhood. And so sometimes, intense, difficult things get sort of sectioned off, and they don't operate normally, and they have such power, and they resonate down the ages. And so it's more about addressing that and trying to heal some of that, which has downstream effects on the way the body functions. And so it's not about reprogramming the mind in a way that changes my personality. I'm still the same person. I'm just functioning, with a little more ease and better health. So to me, I was curious and a little maybe guarded initially, but within one session, I have to say, Madeline, you're very comforting and safe to work with. And I think you're really gifted. I know that, you're not trained as a therapist, but you have, your persona is very warm and safe. And, I've shared really difficult things, and it has been a very good experience. You're really trustworthy and take care with these very vulnerable things. And so that's really a testament to your abilities, to who you are as a person and your skill as a MAP practitioner, to be able to take all of that together, figure out the right instructions for, what's going on with me individually. These are individualized instructions for each client. And to be able to manage the session so well. I just want to underscore that it's a really positive experience. It's something that I look forward to. Oh, good. Today's a MAP day. What's going to happen? And I'm going to come away again, just feeling a lot more settled, a lot less burdened, and just really having a lot more clarity on what's going on with me. And that just feels like such a gift.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And yeah, I do want people to understand this is personalized, right? I mean, there is no recipe. It's not like you came to see me and said, gee, I have, mast cell activation, syndrome, and I want to work on this. And I said, oh yeah, and here's my recipe, here's my protocol for working with MCAS. Like, no, that's not how this works, right? It is all about the person. It's like, yes, each person, on the intake form, puts down what their health concerns are, or what it is that they want to work with. Because some people come to see me just for anxiety or depression or panic attacks, or, something more on the emotional level. But anyway, whatever the concerns are, I almost have to, when it comes to the physical concerns, I almost have to put that on, like, to the side, right? Because the way the patterns that have developed for you are really based on what has happened to you in your life. And that's the part I need to understand, right? I need to understand what is bothering you in your life, whether it's the symptoms or something else, what your emotional response is to that, what the linkages are. Like I'm always looking for the patterns, and trying to figure out where do we need to go, right, to resolve, to find the root cause and to resolve it. Each session is unplanned. I mean, we both show up, we talk about what the subject could be, we pick something, and we just take it from there. And your subconscious mind is really, really guiding us to sort of what links to what, and taking us through the session so that we end up, hopefully in a 90-minute session, really having addressed some issue to some depth, right? I do feel like in 90 minutes, so after the first session, we work in 90-minute sessions, and I feel like with that amount of time, we can really, dig pretty deeply into whatever topic we've identified for that day. People would probably wonder, like, well, what are the sessions on, right? Given what I've said and given what you wanted to work with, I think most people would be surprised to hear that for the most part, we didn't really work on symptoms specifically. I don't think so, right? Yeah. I mean, maybe a few of ours, our sessions were on a physical symptom that was bothering you, but for the most part, it was just things that were taking an emotional toll on you, maybe like things that you became aware were bothering you more than they should be, or I don't know, things that were weighing on you. I don't know. How would you describe that?
Yeah. And I appreciated your feedbacks just in our last session. I said, yeah, if just prior to, very recently, things were humming along so nicely. Just, I was overjoyed, just huge reduction in my symptoms, just feeling great emotionally. And then, a bunch of stuff has happened, kind of some stressful things. And so I had said, I've noticed an uptick in a couple symptoms where they had been fairly quiet before, and I'm not sure what this is about. So I live in California. We've had a lot of poor quality air from all the wildfires, and so I'm really sensitive to that. I have asthma. I wasn't sure if that was a factor, but also something had happened that really upset me, and I knew, again, this was a situation that I was massively over responding to. It was such a short incident. It was 100% me and my reaction. It was not external, it was internal. And so you very much said, I don't think it's so much the air, the quality of the air. I think it's more of this emotional driver. And so I think that's the way we kind of would unpack where to go. So we didn't really talk about in detail, like the symptom and what is it like and how has it been more intense. It was more, what's been going on in your life recently? And so and I know for me with my health conditions, stress is a major, major trigger. And so having, wrestled a lot with post-traumatic stress, it's just something that comes up for me again and again and again. And I know that the stress and the way I handle stress and the way my body responds to stress goes hand in hand with what's going on with me physically. So whatever's going on emotionally, mentally for me manifests physically in my body. And so that's how we would get started. So it wasn't necessarily directly addressing any particular physical symptom. But I have to say also, in one of our sessions, I really appreciate your expertise and the amount of, education and reading that you've done for yourself that can be helpful to clients. And so I've known, for a while that I have this issue where, when people close to me are hurting emotionally, I hurt emotionally. When people close to me have some physical thing, it lives in my own body. And so you really helped clarify that for me, that you've done a lot of reading and studying about empaths. And so I am an empath. Other people's stuff literally lives in my body. And that's it's a lot, and so you had a lot of insights about how to navigate that, and helping me with tools and suggested readings on the side. No pressure, no expectation, no checking in. Did I read this, ever, just putting it out there for me if I wanted it, which I did. And so, that's kind of how a session would unfold. I would just sort of talk about a situation, and, I really am admiring your tremendous skill and insight in being able to tease out among a very, detailed scenario about what pieces of this are important. How can we grab onto this thread and take a look at what's going on there at a deeper level?
Yeah. So I think what all this underscores, right? I think what we're trying to sketch out here is that physical symptoms can be alleviated by working on the psychodynamic factors that underlie them, right? That's, I guess, we could say this is kind of the premise of using the MAP method for chronic health issues. Not all MAP method practitioners work with chronic health issues. I just happen to be one of those people that came to this method from a nutritional therapy background where I was already working with people with chronic health issues, only I was trying to help them with diet and supplements and lifestyle changes. And then I kind of got onto I discovered neural retraining and, learned a basic method, realized I needed an advanced method for people who had more significant trauma histories. And then I learned this method, and now this is my entire practice. But I think that people may not understand. I think we're kind of in this right at the cusp, right? We're right at the beginning of this beginning of understanding how the psyche, which is our thoughts and emotions, affect our nervous system, our brain function, and therefore the immune system and other systems of the body, the endocrine system, and so forth. And this is reflected in the science, the emerging science of psychoneuroimmunology. And so when people, as more people sort of catch on to this idea that what goes on in the mind, like we were talking about thoughts and emotions, affects function, physiological function on every level. And this is a fundamentally different way of addressing physical health conditions than Western medicine or even alternative medicine, which is more about like, how do we get at that chemically or structurally, right? Like, how do we resolve the symptoms through some kind of, biochemical pharmaceutical method or supplements or diet or acupuncture, acupressure, massage, right? This is a different realm. So if for the person who's tried all of those things and is still wanting, I think that something like the MAP method is it's a worthy thing to try, as a next step. And maybe that describes your journey to some extent.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, I was on this odyssey to try to become as healthy as I could and take as few medications as I could. And so I have tried many, so many things, everything you've mentioned and we talked about and more. I can say unequivocally, the MAP method has been the most helpful thing that I've done. Out of everything, the most tangible improvements in my health and my sort of psycho-emotional well-being. And it's really evident. And this anecdote may be just individual to me. It may be more applicable to some of your other clients, but there was a day when, something had happened in my home with one of my teenagers, and I was very upset, irritated, just really wound up about this. And throughout the day, my neck pain really returned and I had a headache and I just felt awful in my spirit. I remember I sat down, I do a gratitude journal every day, and I write down 5 things I'm grateful for. And I started with number 1, and I just wrote, I just can't do this. I'm just so not in place. I cannot even think of anything I'm grateful for right now. I just was not in a good emotional place, and my body felt awful. And so I wasn't productive. I couldn't do anything. So I decided I'm going to go meditate for a bit. And so I put on two different short meditations that I really enjoy and I usually respond to really well. So I did that, I felt kind of slightly better. And then I put on one of your MAP on the Go audio recordings, which was 10 minutes long. And I think I chose the inner peace one because I was really hoping for some inner peace. And, these recordings have, like nature sounds. So it's running water and chirping birds. And underneath there's, your voice under of different instructions for the subconscious. So I did that for 10 minutes and I could tell something was happening and it wasn't. And I have other audio meditations of, babbling brook and running water and it's not the same. So it's definitely the instructions going on underneath. And during that 10-minute listening, I could tell that something was happening in my system because I kept sighing these huge sighs, these big releasing deep breaths, and my mouth was watering. I was salivating. It was all of this vagus nerve activity going on. And by the end of this, I got up and I was in a great mood and my neck pain was literally gone. I mean, it was such a stark, shocking. I mean, I told people close in my life about this. You will not believe what just happened. It was so amazing to me. And, that doesn't happen every time. And, it definitely is supportive and it's something I use, but that was such a profound experience to me that again underscored how powerful this method is for me. My subconscious really likes this. I was such a mess, just mentally couldn't focus. I was very agitated and wound up and my body hurt. And these are clearly connected. And when I was done with that, literally 10 minutes later, I was a new person. It was just so amazing to me. And again, I don't want to, promise that for everybody, but this was my individual experience on one day when I was really having a hard day. So I am just so thrilled to have happened on, thank you, kind stranger, on the internet, that, happened onto the MAP method, connected with you. It's really provided so many great benefits in my life that I hoped it would.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Dawn. It's been lovely having you on the show and having you share your experiences with the MAP method. I think this will help a lot of people.
Excellent. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to talk with you.
Thanks for joining us for the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. Please listen again and remember to follow us and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or Stitcher. To learn more about health applications of the MAP method of advanced neural retraining, visit our website, mindremapforhealth.com. To learn more about the MAP Coaching Institute, visit mapcoachinginstitute.com. Until the next time, be well and flourish. Content of this podcast copyright 2021 by Twin Cities Neural Retraining. Music by Barbara Ben.